What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Do You Have a Moment? I am your host, Stephen Williams, and today I have a very interesting question for you, and that is, do you have a moment to talk about guilty pleasure movies? In particular, I want to talk about one guilty pleasure movie, which is my guilty pleasure movie, but first off, what is a guilty pleasure movie? Well, a guilty pleasure movie is a movie that is not normally seen as like, a good movie or like a really positive movie or something like that. It's usually just kind of a okay or sometimes even bad movie, but you just can't help but like it and enjoy it and watch it and just over and over again. You can never get enough of just going back to it every once in a while just to rewatch it. And with that said, I'm sure everybody listening to this right now has their own guilty pleasure movie. I know a lot of people do. Like, there are some people who could be like into action movies, but their guilty pleasure movie is Mean Girls. So with that said, though, my guilty pleasure movie that I want to talk about on this episode and why it's my guilty pleasure movie and why I enjoy it so much is the movie from 1996, Independence Day. Now, Independence Day, it was your stereotypical summer blockbuster movie. It was just one of those movies that came out just for you to go and watch, and it was just action and jokes, and it was just fun. It was just stupid fun. But it was actually one of the first movies when I was a kid that I actually saw that wasn't like, cartoons or, like made for like kids. And it was that and Jurassic Park that I saw. Which ironically both have Jeff Goldblum in it. Interesting. But I fell in love with Independence Day when I was a kid. And even still to this day, I bring up the movie every once in a while to watch it. And a lot of people, surprisingly, when I grew up and I actually started like watching or listening to people like critiquing movies and stuff like that, it actually really surprised me how many people don't like the movie. Like, they don't think it's a good movie. And a lot of it has to do with like certain plot points, which I'll get into that later in this episode. But they say it's like slow paced and all that kind of stuff. Well, in this episode, I kind of want to break down that I don't think it is. And I'm going to try to explain like bits and pieces that I think really make it a good movie. So anyways, without any further ado, let's get into my guilty pleasure movie, Independence Day. So right off the bat, the thing in the movie that I just love is there's always a lot of problems with movies nowadays with pacing, where it takes like a long time to get into the action. And one of the biggest complaints that people had about this movie was, yeah, it takes a long time before anything really happens. But I'm like, what movie are you watching? Because literally the very first scene of the movie, boom, alien spaceship right there. And from there, yeah, it is a slow burn. But the biggest thing about like the first 40 minutes of the movie is it's introducing your characters, but it's constantly bringing the aliens back up like every 10 minutes. But it's, again, moving slow. First, you see the spaceship show up in the first scene. 10 minutes later, you see the satellite dish go right up against it, and you just see how big this ship is, and the satellite dish crashes into the ship. And then 10 minutes later, you see the smaller ships break off from the bigger ship. And then 10 minutes later, you see them coming through the atmosphere. And then they burst through the atmosphere, and then they put themselves in position. And then 10 minutes later, they do the attack. Like, so their presence is always there. And the first 40 minutes is setting it up. Yes, it is slow, but to be honest, that's actually one of the reasons why I like the movie so much, because the presence is always there. And when I watch it, it almost looks like how a normal invasion kind of situation would act. Like, you're seeing all the bits and pieces when they first discover the signal, when they first realize that their satellites are messing up, when they first realizing that the thing that they detected in the sky was slowing down, when they realize it's split into pieces, and like, they're in the Oval Office and they're discussing like, what do we do? Do we go to like DEFCON 2 or DEFCON 3? Like, what do we do? Do we just blow it out of the sky? Do we what do we do? And surprisingly, those are actually the scenes I like the most. I love just seeing these people in this political thing trying to figure out what they do. Even when the ships get there and cover the cities, because they're city sized, they're 15 miles wide, these smaller ships. Again, they just hover there. They don't do anything. And when the ship first comes out of the atmosphere, out of the fire and the smoke, I still think it's one of the creepiest alien movie moments ever. The sound of the ship, it's making like this weird, like creaking sound as it just slowly hovers and takes over the entire city that it's coming over. It's still like, it's so eerie to me, and I love it. I love it to death. And then especially the fact that we don't even get to see what the aliens look like again for a good chunk of the movie, because it's like it's instead building the tension from the ships arriving and what they're doing and how they're attacking and all that kind of stuff, that we don't even get to see the aliens for a while. And I think that actually helps it even better, because it keeps your interest. You're like, oh, I'm not just getting everything thrown at me. Here's the ship, here's the aliens, they're attacking, let's go. Like, and I know a lot of people complain about that, but I think it's great. Now let's go on to characters in the movie. So there's a lot of characters in this movie, and I'm not going to remember a lot of the actors' names, so I'm going to call them more by their actual character names in the in the movie. But there's a lot of like just side characters there too. So the general, the head general, I forget his name and I forget the actor's name, I apologize, but he's one of the first ones that comes into the picture when he gets information about this ship kind of, you know, moving into place. And he even calls out, he's like, oh, what is it? A meteor? They're like, no, why not? It's not. And he's like, how do you know? And they're like, well, it's slowing down. And he's like, it's what? They're like, it's slowing down. And so he calls like the Secretary of Defense and the president, and they get all that together. Here we get introduced to the president, which is Bill Pullman's character, and he is President Whitmore, and he's a president right away that, you know, they show off of the news and stuff like that, that he's not really well liked. They think he's too young. He's just an old Gulf service member, and, you know, they think that he's inexperienced. He's not good at that. Great way to set it up, you know, because he's about to be involved in one of the biggest things that ever happened to the planet. So going on from there, we get introduced to Levinson, which is David Levinson, which is Jeff Goldblum's character. And we meet him through his father, his Jewish father. Oh shoot! What's funny is I just watched the movie last night before I recorded this, and shoot, what was the Julius Levinson is the name of his father, and he's kind of there. He's funny, you know. I really like the character. I know he's a stereotype, but you know, everyone in this movie is kind of a stereotype. You got David the nerd. You got like the, you know, young inexperienced president. You got Will Smith's character, who's just the, you know, bad, you know, cool, you know, smooth talking, you know, military guy, you know. So everyone in this movie is a one-dimensional character. They really kind of are. Like there's no like big growth in the characters throughout the movie. But I think that's why they have all these characters, is because they have all of these one-dimensional characters that when you put them all together and mish them in a pot, kind of like, you know, the episode that I just did before this with Red versus Blue, the idea of the characters that make them entertaining is that they're one-dimensional characters, but they bounce off of each other because all of them are different, but they all end up interacting with each other towards the end of the movie. They all end up being brought together. You see their individual stories, and then they slowly come together, and then now you get to see all of their situations and all their attitudes and stuff clash. And I really like it. And Will Smith's character, again, is really interesting because he doesn't even show up in the movie until I think, like I said, the 40-minute mark of the movie, which for a main character, like his name is slapped on the freaking poster, you know, and he's on the poster. He doesn't show up for 40 minutes in the movie because they're setting up all this stuff. And I do like, you know, that they jump around and they show, okay, you're at the White House here. Okay, now you're with David. Okay, now you're with Will Smith's character. Okay, now you're with, you know, the aliens and seeing them slowly move in. And then it just moves around a lot. And of course, in the 90s, CGI wasn't really a big thing around too. Yeah, they use CGI in this movie, and some scenes, you know, do look better than others. Some are a little dated, like the opening scene showing Earth, you know, from the moon's perspective is, you know, a little cheesy. It looks like more like the old school Universal logo than it does actual planet Earth. But that's actually where I kind of discovered when I watched it the other day, because I bought it online, and you have both the HD and the SD version. I watched HD for the first little bit, and then I switched it to SD, and it actually really makes everything look better, because like it's one of those weird things, like when you move things to like 4K that were not meant to be 4K, and they look like they're just shot on a set, like they're not like in the world or anything like that. So it actually helps watching it in standard definition. If you ever do watch the movie, if you've never seen it before, I would say watch it in standard definition. Like don't watch it in HD, because you will notice like those bad CGI moments. But again, for the most part, the movie looks pretty dang good. I mean, people might disagree with me on this. I think it still looks great. I think the design of the spaceships are great. I think the dogfight battles look great. And a lot of it was because it was kind of like done how almost Star Wars was back in the day, where it was a mix of practical and CGI effects. When you see a plane or a ship like that exploding in the movie, that was a practical effect. It was a practical explosion that they basically put into the scene. And I'll get more to like the practical side of it and the parts of the movie that I love that were really practical here in a little bit. But anyways, let's get back to the actual movie plot and the characters and all that kind of stuff. So again, the slow burn of the intro of the movie is really entertaining. And of course, when the aliens finally do attack and they wipe out like cities, like massive cities, just with one shot of their massive weapon from their ship, and it blows up all these landmarks, you know, the Empire State Building, the White House, you know, just everything just disintegrating, and it blows up the entire city. I love the fact that after the scene happens where the city gets blown up, it actually changes from the July 2nd to July 3rd. So it's showing you that all of this is happening within a 3-day period. July 2nd, July 3rd, and then obviously July 4th, Independence Day. And when it hits that, like after all the action of like the city exploding and everyone running and people getting killed and all that kind of stuff, for it to just cut to July 3rd makes you go, that was all in one day? Like all of the alien, like them seeing the signal, the alien ship arriving, the ships coming down to the planet, them sitting there for a couple hours. I think David says that their signal that they had before they attacked was 6 hours, and then they finally attack and they blow it up, and then it just goes to the next day. And it's like, wow. And of course, the first shot when it goes to the next day, just showing New York just completely gone and the ship still just hovering there, closing its main cannon, is again haunting. And that's just what's so cool about that first scene after July 2nd to July 3rd in the movie, is because they let you breathe. They let you take in what just happened. Sure, we have a joke with the Russell character, which I didn't talk about him, but he's just like, you know, with his kids and watching his kids. He's a crop duster pilot, you know, ex-Vietnam, I think. And he, you know, always talks about how he was kidnapped by aliens a long time ago. And, you know, sure enough, when he hears that all the cities are ruined, he's like,
I've been saying it. I've been saying it for 10 damn years. Ain't I been saying it, Miguel? Huh? I've been saying it.
But then when they go outside and they see all of these like RVs and people, like just masses of people that evacuated cities, they're like, oh my gosh, look at all this. And they take it in. And then we cut to the president on Air Force One, who escaped, you know, the city before it blew up. And he has a moment to sit and reflect. Like, he's just like, we could have evacuated the cities hours ago. You know, a lot of people died today, and a lot of people didn't have to. And I enjoy movies that let those harsh moments sink in. Like, there's so many movies nowadays that I see where it's like, there'll be something where, like, I'll use like the Transformers movies, or heck, I could even use the sequel to Independence Day, which, by the way, don't ever watch that movie. That movie was a disaster. It came out 20 years after the first one, and it was just horrible. But where they like have this big moment and there's explosions and ships, cities blow up and bridges blow up, and you see these innocent people getting stepped on and shot by bad robots and Decepticons and all that kind of stuff. And then after that, they crack a joke and they go, well, I mean, at least, you know, we have we're still here. Or sorry, I can't think of a joke right now, but they make a joke out of it instead of just like, a lot of people just died and you're just cracking a joke. Like, what the heck? In the second Independence Day movie, they do this where they're literally flying a ship as like stuff is falling from the sky. They're seeing people falling to their death from the gravity of the giant ship above them, and just stuff's exploding and all that, and all this crazy things. And then afterwards, the pilot turns to Jeff Goldblum's character and goes,
"Pee your pants?" Yeah. Yeah, me too.
It's like, you just saw people falling to their death, and you just crack a joke like, yeah, peed yourself? Yeah, that's fun. I was just like, oh my God, this movie is so bad. But in this movie, the first one, they actually let you have that moment. Like he has to evaluate that like millions of people just lost their lives because they didn't act. They didn't know what to do. They waited to the last second, and it's harsh. And then of course after that we do get, jokes between David and his father because David gets plain sick and all that. But, it's like it lets you sit with the moment of what just happened. And then it goes back to like, here's some comedy, let's brighten the moment a little bit. So then at this part of the movie, it does the whole thing where they're like, we were unprepared. And Julius is just like, you had those spaceships from Roswell, New Mexico. And the president's like, no, we don't have those ships. But then Secretary of Defense is like, that's not entirely accurate. And this is another complaint that I saw from critics, is that the Area 51 thing. They're like, oh, okay, they just put Area 51 into this movie? Yeah, okay. And I'm like, what? They took a piece of conspiracy and like history that people were always talking about and tied it into their movie. I always think that's clever. If there's ever like a mystery or like something that's not fully explained and then they explain it in a movie and just like tie it in. Again, I'm a sucker for like Transformers, for example. And where the Michael Bay Transformers movies kind of do it like weird, where it's like every movie is tied into Transformer like history, where it's like, oh, the moon landing, Transformers. Oh, Merlin and the Knights, Transformers. Oh, like everything was tied into Transformers. I was like, that was a little too much. But like Transformers Prime, for example, was a good example of it, where there was a lot of history and attachment between the Transformers, but then they found out it's because Unicron was in the planet, and so therefore the two planets were always linked in some way, explaining why these different things happened. Like the Predacons in Transformers Prime, for example, they were mythical beasts that we have in our legends, like griffins and dragons and hydras and stuff like that. So when we see those drawings now, we're like, oh, they were just mythical creatures. They didn't actually exist. They just made them up. But they tied it in where it's like, no, they actually did see these creatures, because these creatures were Transformers that were sent here to look for Energon, and they were these creatures. They weren't just like cats and wolves and stuff like that. They were actually mythical creatures. So anyways, so the Area 51 stuff doesn't bother me. I actually thought it was pretty cool that they tied it into there. And so they go there and they look at everything and they find everything. And then this is where, Will Smith's character, they attack the ship. And I still think this attack on the ship was great too, because again, it's like, okay, they attacked us. Now we get our revenge, right? No, they fly up there, they shoot their missiles, and they realize, oh, the ship has shields. Again, we're like almost an hour into the movie and shields is just brought up for the first time in this movie, but we visually see it. They don't just like go, oh, I can't hack into it, they must have a shield. No, they literally go, all right, let's attack these guys. And they all shoot their missiles and all of them just hit a shield. And then they're like, what now? And then these little spaceships come out and basically just eradicate all of the pilots, like just blow them all up. So they're even more screwed up than they were. And the president's like watching it from Air Force One, and he's like screaming like, get them out of there! Like he's actually aggressive, like get them out of there. Like they're not winning this fight. So Will Smith's character eventually outpilots one of the ships, and he gets it to crash, and he gets the alien, punches it in the face, where the famous
"Welcome to Earth"
quote comes from. And then he drags that thing, and he ends up finding a whole bunch of RVs that are heading to Area 51 base, or they're heading to somewhere safe. But when they find him, he basically points out Area 51 because he saw it while he was flying overhead. And so they go to Area 51, he brings the alien in, and this is like, again, we see the alien when he punches it, and it's like this weird shaped alien. But then at Area 51, we find out what they actually look like, and they're like these smaller aliens with these big heads. Like they look like typical big head aliens, really skinny arms and stuff like that. But they wear what's explained in the movie as biomechanical suits. And I actually think that's kind of a cool concept, is like, oh, your machinery is not based off of just like, moving parts and gears and stuff like that, but you literally grow flesh suits that you can operate from the inside, like the nervous system and all that. And of course, they point out that the aliens are telepathic too. They have no vocal cords, so they communicate via just telepathy. And again, an interesting concept, because again, I keep comparing it to like Transformers, but Transformers, like everyone is just like, oh, they're made of metal. And it's like, no, they're not, because in the actual like comics and stuff like that, it explains that they're living metal. They're still cellular structures, but their outside, bits and pieces are basically hardened by their stem cell kind of body tissue that moves and changes. And so a biomechanical suit is actually kind of similar to that, where it's a machine, but it's like flesh and pieces like that. So it leads to the scary, scene of them trying to cut open the alien to get the actual, or the suit to get the alien out of it. And the alien wakes up and he attacks everyone. And the design of the alien, like the suit, is just terrifying. And I actually had the toy of that suit when I was young, and it literally like had like a speaker on it, and it would open up and it would like roar and scream, and you could set it to be motion activated. And I remember I had to take the batteries out of it because it would literally just go off in the middle of the night, like in my closet. Like it would just, like I was just like, ugh, like what is going on? So I had to take the batteries out of it. But yeah, again, so like the movie, it continues on from there, but I won't give into too many details after that. Because the movie keeps going, it keeps adding these things, and every single time you think mankind's going to win something, they end up losing again. They end up having something happen to them. And so it's just a slow burn movie of them trying to figure it out, trying to get revenge. And I will lead to this one spoiler moment, because this is another big scene that people could not get over when you look at critic videos. And that is, they eventually get through the shields of the ships and realize how they can do it by David creating a computer virus that will deactivate their shields. And people always complain, if you watch any critic video, that they're just like, oh, he just creates a virus that can interact with alien technology just like that? That's like stupid, and like, how would that happen? That couldn't happen. And the sad part is, there is actually a scene that explains it in the director's cut. Not in the original release of the film, the one that went out to, everyone, and that is on DVDs and stuff like that. There's a deleted scene where, after getting to Area 51, Dr. Oken, who's the head of everything, the president tells David, hey, why don't you work with Oken, since you're the one who discovered the signal in the satellites, and maybe you can help him out. Well, they actually go into the spaceship that they have at Area 51, which is they realize is the same kind of ship of the race of aliens that's attacking them. And Oken's like showing him around. He's just like, oh, you have this piece here. This is their oxygen tube. This is all this. And then he looks at the dashboard of it, and there's all these like moving waves and stuff. And he's just like, we still haven't been able to make heads or tails of like how this operates. And David actually pulls out his laptop and shows him. He's like, well, actually. And he opens it up and he shows the signal that he found, the waveform of the signal that he found inside their satellites that the aliens put there to take over the satellites. And he shows that it matches, like it compares to how the dashboard of the ship operates is through this signal. And it's through that scene that they realize that the alien technology doesn't work like ours, where it's just like ones and zeros and like, script code and stuff like that, but instead operates through wavelengths and like different frequencies and that kind of stuff. Like all of their technology operates via the frequencies. And so when David builds the virus to affect their ships, he builds it based off of the waveform that he found in their satellite dishes that the alien put there, because he can use that to basically interrupt their systems. So he realizes the connection between the signal that he found and how their ships operate is almost identical. So he's able to alter the ships, like how the ship works and how their ships work, by altering the wavelength of the frequency. And that's how he affects the mothership, is he puts the virus in there that's based on the frequency. You can even see when he's uploading the virus, you see the original signal waveform, and then you see the modified waveform pop up behind him, behind his loading virus like little upload thing. So the answer is there. It's just not in the original release of the movie. And that's what's so sad. I was like, whoever was on the editing floor and made that decision, why? Like, that is like the biggest part that you need to have in your movie to explain how he makes a virus, and you completely cut it out of the movie. Anyways, so that's with that. Let's go back to the effects of the movie. And this is another part that I really enjoy, and I really suggest a lot of people, if you're interested in like movies and effects and stuff like that, go watch the behind the scenes of the making of Independence Day, because the way they do a lot of their practical effects is actually really cool. So when the aliens first attack the cities, they blow up the main center landmark, like the White House and stuff like that. But then when they blow it up, it just starts a chain reaction of just fire rolling out that just it consumes the entire city, blows up all the buildings and all that stuff. And the visuals during this scene is just so good. like seeing the fire roll through, you know, buildings and roll over. Like, it doesn't like go upwards, it goes through. Like, the fire just like goes straight through at like a vertical level, or not vertical, sorry, horizontal level. And the way they did it behind the scenes, it's really, really cool, is they made models, which you would expect, but then they hung the models on a wall, placed the camera up top looking down, and then placed a flamethrower at the bottom of the model and basically released the fire so it would roll through the buildings, exploding them as it went up towards the camera. It was really cool, like, and it looks crazy in the actual movie in the end. So just the way they did all that. And then, of course, the practical effect of the alien. Like, the alien, again, was a real practical effect. The tentacles, the giant head, you know, the alien that's inside of the mech suit, like, they were all practical. They were all puppets. And it looks cool. It looks creepy. I mean, the biosuit with its tentacles and all that stuff and how tall it is just terrifying. But yeah, it's the way that it's made is just so well done. I enjoy it. Again, it's my guilty pleasure movie. I will never not enjoy Independence Day. Like, and not to mention, it has one of the best speeches in any cinema I've ever seen. And that's when the president basically gives his speech to everyone in their final attack against the aliens. And he just goes off on this big old thing. And it's just like, if you're sitting there going like, if this was a real life situation and the president gave that speech, he would never not be president for the rest of his life. Like, everyone would just be like, nope, he's going to stay our president forever because this guy knows what he's doing. Another complaint that people have from the critics is, of course, after he gives the speech, he actually says he's going to be a pilot and go and engage everyone because he was part of the Gulf War. So he was like, I want to be with my men. And of course, people are like, that would never happen in real life. I was like, have you ever seen real life in which like 70% of the planet was wiped out? No? Well, let's just say like this is where you have to like get rid of your suspension of disbelief and just be like, that's cool. Like, he wants to be alongside his fellow fighters. Like, I'm in this fight with you kind of thing. And so that doesn't bother me either. I'm just like, that's cool. And of course they still have the general and stuff like that could take over as president if he got blown up. Like, so, but anyways, it's such a good movie. I still enjoy it. I will never get tired of it. The characters are great. Will Smith's character is great. Jeff Goldblum's character is great. Even all the side characters like Julius and Vivica Fox, her character, Jasmine, is great because, first off, she's great because she's not just in the movie just to be, oh, she's Will Smith's, you know, attractive girlfriend character. No, she does stuff. She actually survives the initial attack from the aliens by hiding in a little like shelter inside of a tunnel, and then she goes around and starts finding people and rescuing people and like pulling them out of rubble. So she's like also a major part of it. So it's just, there's so many good parts. So think about this. Think about your favorite guilty pleasure movie, what you enjoy about it, why you enjoy it, and just talk to people about it. Just say, yeah, go watch it. You know, you might not like it, but I just want you to kind of understand where I'm coming from. So I would definitely recommend, if you've never seen Independence Day before, go ahead and watch it. You can get it on Amazon. Watch it. If you enjoy it, great. If you like, you'll probably look at it and be like, yeah, that's a 90s movie. Absolutely. But there's nothing wrong with that sometimes. Like, it's just fun to go back and just be like, yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was just a movie that wasn't trying to teach you lessons. It wasn't trying to do anything. It was just like, hey, here, have some fun for 2 hours. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Do You Have a Moment? I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you go check out Independence Day if you've never seen it before, so you can kind of understand where I'm coming from. And yeah, so I still have a couple other ideas for shows, so I'm gonna keep putting them out as long as I keep thinking of stuff. And I hope you've been keeping up so far. I've really enjoyed making these things. I always enjoy talking about stuff that I, enjoy just on a personal level. And I will hope to bring a lot more of it to you here in the coming future. So again, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.